April 30th, May 1st. So see Mark if you can help. I've known today's speaker since he was an undergraduate. Probably about 10 years I've known him. He's the only person, you've read his bio. He's on the board of the Foundation Beyond Belief. He's a past chair of the board of Secular Student Alliance. He's written the book, I Sold My Soul on eBay, and he's the blogger of A Friendly Atheist. He is the only person that a reporter's ever called me and said, tell me about this person. Not tell me about this project, not tell me about this organization, but give me some insight into this creative mind. Is he so full of creative ideas? And I said, well, yes, he is. And people who know him well are not the least bit surprised when he comes up with something really exciting and creative. But people who don't know him well are, because the rest of the time he's very quiet, very supportive, very matter-of-fact, and very quiet. He is, I'm not exaggerating, one of the great minds of free thought today, and free thought, and certainly of free thought in the future. Hemant, please come up and be welcome.
That's a really sweet introduction. I got nothing for you after that. Let's see if this thing works. I'm going to see if the sound works here.
I went bowling the other night and I saw a man pray to his bowling ball. An adult human being. Pray to God for bowling help. Please, God, please give me this moment of strength. Please, Lord, in your name, give me this moment of glory. No, man. God is not going to help you bowl, okay? I think God has more important things to do than help you bowl. But then I started thinking about how screwed up the world is right now. Maybe God does have time. Because haven't you ever had a long list of things to do for the day and you only pick the easy things to do first? Maybe that's what God is doing. All right, so, genocide, poverty, war. I'm gonna get that 7-10 split. There you go. You're welcome, Buffalo. Oh, hey, Africa. Sorry again for the delay. Maybe after the Super Bowl. I'm kidding. Of course, I'm kidding. God doesn't exist. Surprise! We're adult humans here. That joke was kind of a metaphor for life, wasn't it? It ends with, God doesn't exist. Surprise!
Sweet. All right, hopefully we got this working. So thank you all for coming today. My name is Hemant Mehta. Thank you so much to Bobby Kirkhart for getting me here. And like right after this, I'm flying right back home so I can go to work tomorrow. I'll tell you, as we're going through this, you'll hear plenty about me. Let me give you a little background about myself and where I'm coming from. What I really want to do is tell you two stories. One is about this thing about how I sold my soul, and the other is how that kind of sort of almost got me in trouble later on down the road. But let me give you some background. This is actually a symbol for a religion called Jainism. Has anyone heard of Jainism? Wow. Okay, you guys didn't exist when I was a kid, because when I was growing up, no one knew what Jainism was. That's the religion I was raised in, and it's similar to Hinduism in some ways. It's an Indian religion, but it's a religion that teaches nonviolence more than anything else. So I've heard Sam Harris, if you read The End of Faith, Sam Harris talks a lot about, how fundamentalist religion is really, really bad. But he also says moderate religion is bad because they provide cover to the fundamentalists. But Sam Harris even says, okay, if the whole world were fundamentalist Jain, all right, we wouldn't be so bad off because they promote nonviolence. And that is like at the top of their agenda. It's nonviolent, so that's great. So if you meet a Jain, stereotypically, you're thinking of someone who covers their mouth as they speak, brushes the ground as they walk so they don't kill any bugs. Now, at the same time, they also believe in reincarnation. They believe in karma. They believe that you'll be reincarnated into a better life form, whatever that means, if you do good things in this life. And it's that sort of thinking that got me saying around high school, I don't think I believe in this. And I jumped from Jainism all the way to saying, well, I don't think this makes any sense, even though some of the ideas are good, to I don't think there's a God at all. So there was nothing in between. So that's my brief history of how I became an atheist. And the downside of that is I didn't know anything about other religions. Like, maybe I have some friends who are Christian or Jewish or Muslim, but I don't really firsthand know about any of these faiths. And that's a problem because, you ought to be educated about things that you don't agree with. So I got into college. I wanted to meet other atheists. Like, a community like this didn't exist in Chicago, where I was from. So when I got to college at the University of Illinois at Chicago, I wanted to start a group. And a friend that I met there who was also an atheist said, well, we should start a group and affiliate with this national group called the Secular Student Alliance. So we did. We started a group at UIC. We called it Students Without Religious Dogma, SWORD, because we liked acronyms. In retrospect, very violent acronym. Don't do that. But we started a group, and we got speakers to come. We had awesome discussions. It was nice to meet a community of other atheists, because that didn't happen very often. But again, through all this time, through all of high school, through all of college, I went from being really Jain to really atheist with nothing in between. And so I graduated from college, and I actually started working with the Secular Student Alliance. I ran for their board of directors. I eventually became chair of their board, and I actually worked with them. I have been working with them for the past 6-7 years. And this whole time, you ask people that work with them or work with other atheist organizations, were you always an atheist? Most of the people I've met say, no, I come from this background or that background. And at some point, I started thinking about it, didn't make sense. Everyone has their version of the story. But you get the idea that a lot of people are coming from a religious background. And they all kind of know what Christianity is like. So when they leave it, they know what they're leaving. And I didn't have that experience. So I wanted to understand what Christianity was like. And I wasn't getting that. And it turned out that after college, I was living in an area of Chicago that was right next to this church. And this is called Old St. Pat's. It's a Catholic church. It's a landmark in the city because it's one of the few buildings that survived the Great Chicago Fire of like 100-some years ago. This is right next to where I live. And you got to understand, at the time, I didn't know there was a difference between like a Catholic mass and a Protestant mass and like a megachurch evangelical crazy mass. They were all the same. I thought they were all pretty much Simpsons-esque. Like, you go there, it's monotone, it's boring. You show up. I thought that's what all church was like. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I could just walk into that church and I could kind of see what it's like. I mean, I could at least experience it firsthand. The problem is, I don't want to just go and watch. I want to ask questions about things they say. And I thought it would be kind of rude if I show up in the back of the room, sit in the back, and then, like, as the priest is talking, tap the person next to me and be like, you really believe that crap? Like, why? That was rude. And I didn't think you could actually go up to the priest after he was done talking. So there's my problem. I want to go, but I want to ask questions about it. So how can I do that? And it turned out that around the time I was wanting to do this, because I had a little bit of free time, this was in the news. Can you all tell what that is? That's the Virgin Mary. And she's hanging out on grilled cheese. So she's on grilled cheese. And this was making headlines everywhere. Because this was one of the first times, like, it got widespread. You hear about it all the time now. Like, Virgin Mary appears on, like, a dog's rear end now. But this was a big deal then. And by the way, this is Virgin Mary on grilled cheese, not to be confused with the toast that was found on Jesus, or the atheist toast that just has nothing on it. But here's the thing. They were selling that Virgin Mary grilled cheese on eBay, and it went for like $25,000. It was crazy. And like some casino bought it because they wanted the publicity that came with it. But I'm like, you know what's weird about the grilled cheese Virgin Mary is people are talking somewhat about religion as a result of it. Yeah, they're saying, okay, that's a bunch of crap, but could the Virgin Mary appear on grilled cheese? Or does the Virgin Mary even exist? Was she really a virgin? I thought it was a clever way to at least get people talking about it, even if that wasn't the true intention. And so I started thinking, maybe I can just pitch myself on eBay and say, I will go to church. And whoever wants to bid can bid. And this is what I ended up putting on eBay. You don't have to read the whole thing, but the gist of it is, I've never been to church. I'm really an atheist. So because it's eBay and money has to be involved somehow, you can bid on where I go to church, or mosque, or synagogue, or whatever. It's all the same. I'll go wherever you want. Every $10 you bid, I'll go to one service. And I was thinking, as a result, I get to ask you questions. That's the exchange we're making here. I will start a website, whatever that, I don't know how to do that, but it sounds like something I could say. I will write a diary, I will take pictures, I'm not lying to you, I will actually go to church. But I want to ask questions about what I experienced there. And so, there you go. There's the auction, take that as you will. I thought, worst case scenario, no one even hears about this, and that's fine. Best case scenario, maybe somebody pays like $10, I go to church one time, I go to a movie afterwards, it's a great day. That's honestly how big I thought this. I was going to say $1 per service, because this wasn't about the money. The problem, I realized, wait, you know what? Some kid with a $10 allowance is going to, schedule my next month or two. So why don't I make it $10? In retrospect, smart move. So anyway, I put this up on eBay. Now, here's the problem with putting this up there. How does anyone even know I'm doing this? How does anyone know that you should bid on this thing if, how are they going to do that? So I tried to do a few things to try to get people to actually see the eBay website, because then maybe they could bid if they wanted to bid. So the first thing on eBay that you could try to get people to draw attention to your auction is there's a section on your auction where you can ask questions about whatever someone's selling. Because if I were selling an iPad on eBay, everyone's going to have the same basic questions. What are they?
What's wrong with
Is it new? What's wrong with it? Yeah, why are you selling this? This is kind of sketchy. And what eBay does is they know you're going to get the same questions over and over. So if someone asks you a question, you could post a response to them, but you can also say, I want their question and my answer right up on the front page so that the next person who sees the auction can see, that's what somebody asked, this is his response, all right, I don't have to ask that question anymore. So somehow, someone found this auction, and someone decided to ask me a question. And their question was, if I win this auction, will you go to Taco Bell and worship the Gordita god? So much for being taken seriously. But, and you only get a little bit of space to write. So I'm like, well, Taco Bell, Gordita god makes as much sense to me as any other god. So I will go to Taco Bell if you win, and I will baptize the Gordita with fire sauce. And clicked it up, put it on the front page. All right, it was fun while it lasted, 10 minutes, whatever. But here's the weird thing. Other people saw the auction, I don't know how, but they started asking serious questions. And Bobby mentioned this, people think they've never met an atheist. And it turned out people never had a chance to ask an atheist a question. So I started getting a question well, if you don't believe in God, where do you get your morals from? And you only get about 140, 160 characters to answer this question. So try to come up with a good philosophical explanation to that in about a sentence. So I'm like, well, if you lost your faith in God, would you go kill everyone? I hope not. Send. And then someone's like, well, if there's no God, where do mountains come from? Here's the link to Wikipedia. Go. But I think then people started saying well, how do you get through the day if you can't pray to God? Or, how do you live your life without God? And, I tried my best to answer their questions. If they were asking a real question, I tried to give them a real answer. And I think people appreciated that because there was, at least at the time, there was really no other forum where you could do that. I know blogs are popular now and there's a lot of books about atheism, but they weren't really that popular at the time. The books were starting to catch steam, but the blogs weren't. So this is one of the few places you could do that. So that was one way. I think people saw, here's an atheist who, if you ask him a respectful question, he'll give you a respectful answer. And so by the end of this auction, it was a week long, there was about 5 pages worth of questions for people to go through. And I think that helped draw people to the auction because I think they knew I was being serious about it. So the second thing is, I said I work with the Secular Student Alliance. It's a national organization. And when we're doing big events, we put out press releases. So I asked the SSA people, can you guys put together a press release? Maybe I can send it out to Chicago newspapers or something. So we wrote something and we said, Hemant Mehta, a 22-year-old at the time from Chicago, is doing this thing on eBay. And we sent it to the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, like local news stations. No one responded. But there was a local paper in my parents' hometown called the Daily Southtown. So we just changed a little bit of the press release and we said, Hemant Mehta, 22-year-old from Chicago, and a graduate of Carl Sandburg High School in the south suburbs, is doing this thing on eBay. And as soon as they saw it, they're like, hey, that's in our reading area. They called me up the next day. They're like, all right, let's talk about this thing. So all of a sudden, like a day later in the Daily Southtown, and this picture isn't going to do it justice, but the banner headline on the Daily Southtown says, auction for salvation. For the right price, an atheist will go to house of worship. I like the first sentence. It's the opposite of selling your soul to the devil. But here's the thing. This is on the front page of, I know it's a local paper, but it's a pretty big local paper. And even better, they put this thing online. And so now people can send it to their friends. You could post it on random websites. And now other people are reading about this. So I got weird emails. I got an email from a Christian guy who said, are you serious about doing this? Because I'm kind of interested in bidding, but I don't know, this seems kind of shady. I'm like, yeah, I'm serious about doing it. And I got an email from another reporter who said, all right, I'll bite. Tell me about what you're doing here. I'm kind of interested, but also thinks I'm kind of sketchy. But again, that's the power of, if you're ever writing any press release, tailor it to the local area, right? And then finally I'm thinking, okay, well, I did this. Is there any other way to get this message out? Who would get really upset and angry at the thought of an atheist going to church and doing something with that? And I was thinking, oh, Republicans. So, I don't know. I asked some friends, do you know any Republican bloggers or something who might be interested in this story? And one friend said, there's this one blog I've heard of called the Dawn Patrol. She's really conservative. She might be interested. You can even see the T in her logo. It's like a cross. I found her website easily, and I wrote to her, and I'm like, hey, I'm doing this auction. I don't know if you're interested, but if you can post something about it, that would be awesome. And she writes back like 2 minutes later. She's like, it's up on the site. I'm like, wow, all right. And I check it out, and here's what I didn't realize. She's super conservative and super popular at the time. I think she stopped blogging now. But when she posted, she basically said, I got an email from this atheist, and I guess I sent it from like Hemant at secularstudents.org. She's like, I checked out the organization. I think he's legitimately an atheist. He's not lying about that. Honestly, it kind of sounds sincere, what he's trying to do. So if you want to go bid, go bid. And when a popular blogger links to anything you do, other people start linking to it too. So all of a sudden, this auction's going around the internet. Not quite viral, I would say, but people are starting to pay attention. And now, the auction itself, on maybe 2 days before the auction, it's at like $100. I'm kind of freaking out because that's way too much money. That's not what I had signed up for, not what I had intended. But I'm also worried because I know that anytime you're selling something popular on eBay, no one bids until the very end. Everyone wants to win. So you hold off on bidding until the last possible second. That way, you're the last person in. No one can beat you because they don't have time, and then you win the auction. So I'm kind of freaked out because I'm like, how much higher is this going to go? So this goes on for a little bit longer, and all of a sudden, it's a day before the auction or so, I get an email from one more guy. He says, hey, I heard about your story. I'm kind of interested. Listen, have you ever heard of Kirk Cameron? I'm like, Kirk Cameron? Like, he's the guy from Growing Pains. Yeah, I've heard of Kirk Cameron. He's like, do you want to be on Kirk Cameron's radio show? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to be on Kirk Cameron's radio show. Send. And then I'm like, what is Kirk Cameron doing these days? And that was really the wrong order of things. So I go to look up, what is Kirk Cameron doing these days? Because I'm going to be on his radio show tomorrow. And here's what Kirk Cameron's doing these days.
Behold, the atheist's nightmare. Now, if you study a well-made banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 ridges. On the close side, 2 ridges. If you give your hand ready to grip a banana, you'll find on the far side there are 3 grooves, on the close side 2 grooves. The banana and the hand are perfectly made one for the other. You'll find the maker of the banana, Almighty God, has made it with a non-slip surface. It has outward indicators of inward contents. Green, too early. Yellow, just right. Black, too late. Now, if you go to the top of the banana, you'll find, as with the soda can makers, they placed a tab at the top. So God has placed a tab at the top. When you pull the tab, the contents don't squirt in your face. You'll find the wrapper, which is biodegradable, has perforations. Notice how gracefully it sits over the human hand. Notice it has a point at the top for ease of entry. It's just the right shape for the human mouth. It's chewy, easy to digest, and it's even curved toward the face to make the whole process so much easier. Seriously, Kurt, the whole of creation testifies to the genius of God's creative mind.
So that was Ray Comfort, actually, and Kirk Cameron was sitting next to him, and they both do this ministry called Way of the Master, and they had a TV show. And I also found other videos of Kirk Cameron where you guys have seen like jaywalking on Jay Leno. Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort go up to people on the street, and basically, here's what they do. Can I get a volunteer for just a second? All right, what's your name? Dan. Dan, are you a good person?
I'd like to think so, yeah.
Uh-huh. Have you ever lied?
Yes.
What does that make you?
A person who's lied once.
That makes you a liar, Dan. have you ever stolen anything? Ever?
Far away.
And what does that make you?
A person who's at least stolen once.
A thief. Is what you mean. And Dan, have you ever taken the Lord's name in vain?
I have no idea what that means.
Have you ever taken the Lord Jesus Christ's name in vain?
Because I don't know what that means. I can't answer.
I'll just assume you're a blasphemer. Dan, on the day of judgment, are you going to go to heaven or are you going to go to hell? You're going to hell. And that's it. That's a random stranger. They do that too. They videotape that and they put it up online. And that's Way of the Master. And that's what Kirk Cameron does. And they're going into like season 7 of their show. So that's what Kirk Cameron does. And I'm going to go on his show the next day. And I know I'm going to do exactly what like Dan I'm going to give the exact same answers essentially. And what? Kirk Cameron's, he's not really going to tell me I'm going to hell, right? So I get on his show and basically they're like, I figure, okay, it's a 2-minute segment. They'll just ask me about my auction. End of story. That's it. And he's like, oh, okay, so what are you doing on eBay? Oh, well, I'm doing this thing where I'm auctioning my time, and maybe people can send me a trick. Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Have you ever taken the Lord's name in vain? Damn it. We go through the entire spiel. Kirk Cameron tells me I'm going to hell. We have a large conversation about how I'm going to hell. 40 minutes later, I get off the phone, and I'm like, what the heck just happened? I can actually download their podcast, so I downloaded it that night. Turned out after I hung up the phone, you heard Kirk and his buddy on the radio saying, ladies and gentlemen, we just got off the phone with a fool. Not our words, the Bible's words. And then they make fun of me for the next 30 minutes, which was the greatest thing to have ever happened because now people were going to the auction site like crazy. And all of a sudden it's at $300. And now I'm freaking out. There goes my next month, right? By the way, Kirk Cameron is still really popular. This is the cover of like the March issue from last year of Charisma Christian Magazine. When they made Left Behind, those books, when they made those into movies, he's the lead actor in them. Like, he's still popular. So all this starts to happen, and now we're finally getting to the point where the auction's about to end, and it's getting closer. So about 5 minutes before this auction is ending, I'm just looking at the counter on the site, and like every time you click how many people have come to the auction site, it like every time I click, refresh, it's jumping up by like 20, 30 every time I click, which means a lot of people are coming to it. And like a minute before it ends, it shoots up to $400. And then about 5 seconds before it ends, shoots up to $500. And then right as like the last second ticks off, someone comes in with a bid of like $504 because they knew how, like, 500 is too round of a number. Let's go a little higher just to make sure. Someone got in with a $504 bid and they won. And I go look at the email, and it's from that Christian guy who said, like, are you serious about doing this? Because I'll bid. It was that guy. And I look at his email address, jim@offthemap.org. So I go to offthemap.org because I want to see who's this guy. And on the banner of their ministry's website, we just won the eBay Atheist. It was 5 seconds later. Like, I asked him later, I'm like, how did you do that? He's like, we figured we were going to win. We had all the code ready to go. But I'm talking to Jim, and he says, I now owe him 50 church visits. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess, which church do you want me to go to for 50 visits? He's like, tell you what, I'm a former pastor, and he's still a Christian, but he's like, I'm a former pastor. I wouldn't want you to go into one church for 50 minutes, or for 50 visits, because that's boring. He's like, tell you what, let's make a deal. You go to 10 churches in Chicago. He's from Seattle, Washington. He said, you go to 10 churches in Chicago. I will pick them for you. And in return, you write about your experience on my ministry's website. And we'll call it a deal. I'm like, that sounds great. Like, it's much better than like every Sunday for a year. So I started going on Jim's behalf. He actually sent me all over the place. I went to like an all-black church. I went to a Christian mega church. I went to a guy's living room because that's how big his church was. I went to Old St. Pat's, and like I went to a variety of churches around Chicago, mostly non-denominational, but some denominations, and I started writing about them on Jim's website. And if you've ever been to any blog or like you've been to YouTube where people can leave comments, it's always scary when people can leave comments because they're not literate and they don't know what they're talking about, and everyone's crazy except for like 3 people. But I started writing about my visits on Jim's website. And people started responding really positively. And you had Christians and atheists responding because they had heard about the auction. They were going to Jim's website. But I would say, I'll tell you what I said in a second, but, I'd write some constructive things, some things I liked, some things I didn't like. And you'd have Christians saying things like, I really agree with you on that. And I hate it when my pastor does that. You'd have atheists say, I hate that too. That's why I left church a while ago. But there would be a civil dialogue, and that doesn't happen very often. So after this auction ended, that other reporter who's like, I'll bite, what are you doing? She said, all right, so my editor said, gave a green light to the story. Can I visit you in Chicago and do a story about you going to church? I want to go to church with you. So she did. She flew in. And then Jim, who lives in Seattle, is like, I want in on this. So he flew into Chicago too. So actually my first church visit was to Old St. Pat's. And, we go in there. I never announce that I'm going to any of these places. I'm just going, casual spectator. They don't know I'm there. But here's the sort of thing I would notice, and I don't know if this is something everyone would notice, or it's just, I haven't been here, so it stands out. But, in Catholic services, they do a lot of the church calisthenics, where they're, going, standing up, kneeling down. And here's the thing, the priest would say, you're doing this prayer, and everyone would do the kneeling and standing, but they would do it, a beat ahead of time. Like, they knew what was coming. They weren't actually thinking about it, they were just going through the motions. And that bothered me. And there would be a time when, at that particular service, the priest was saying something like, he was actually giving something of a sermon where he said, for 20 years I was a smoker, smoked like 1 or 2 packs a day. And then I knew I had to stop because I had kids and my wife didn't like it and my friends didn't like it. I knew I had to stop smoking. So I put my trust in God and I said, God, you got to help me stop smoking. And God said, you just got to go cold turkey. Just stop. No patch, nothing just stop. And he said, and from that day on, I never smoked a thing. Nope, I just quit cold turkey, never gone back since. Now, regardless of the God thing, I thought that was a pretty powerful story. But as soon as this priest finished it, this emotional, touching story goes right back into all right, now you're going to stand up, sit down, let's take communion. And I'm like, really? That's a boring, scripted, why are you doing that? So I wrote about that thing too on Jim's website. And when we talked about it later, Jim was trying to explain to me why people might be doing some of these things, but even he was at a loss to trying to explain some of this stuff. But again, that's the sort of thing I was writing about, where I really liked what this priest said, but why do you have to bring God into it? Why can't you just give your own willpower some credits? Because that's a hard thing to do, and we talk about that stuff. So I did about 5 of these visits. I'm about halfway done. The reporter calls me up and she's like, all right, the article's going to be in the paper tomorrow, just a heads up. And the next day, I check out this paper, and on the front page of the Wall Street Journal is this headline, on eBay, an atheist puts his own soul on the auction block. And yeah, I'm thinking what you're thinking, holy crap, his teeth are bigger than his face. Oh, my friends mocked me forever for this. And if you open up the article, you actually saw a picture of Jim too. This is the most surreal thing that could possibly happen. And let's talk about a couple things. The headline, it's a metaphor, right? Because I didn't actually sell my soul. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a soul. That doesn't even make any sense. But I get it. It's a cute metaphor for what I did, which is selling my time. But here's the problem with that. That goes up, and the Wall Street Journal is really popular. And all these other newspapers want to reprint this article, maybe an edited version of it, shorten it down a bit. But so the Chicago Sun-Times says, we want to do the same article. We're going to reprint it, but can we get a picture to go with you? And here's what's weird about this. That morning that this showed up in the paper, I started getting phone calls out of nowhere. Like, I don't know how all these people got my cell phone number, but I get calls out of nowhere. I mean, we said Chicago Sun-Times was calling. Good Morning America called. Anderson Cooper 360 people called. Like, a guy from Harvard who I'd never heard of called. I don't know why. There was a game show host who was like, hey, we want a panelist for like a Tell Me Your Secret. So, I don't. Most of these people had nothing. Most of these people canceled on their stuff. But a lot of people were calling. The Sun-Times said, we're just going to reprint this article. Can we get a picture to go with it? Because they can't use these. And so I'm like, well, sure, you can just send someone over. And they're like, well, is there a location by you where we could take a picture? I guess Old St. Pat's Church? I don't know. They're like, okay, call them and see if they're open. We'll send a photographer your way right now. So I called Old St. Pat's Church. I didn't really say nice things about them, like overall. And they reflected that in this article. And I call up Old St. Pat's. I'm like, hi, are you guys open today? Who wants to know? They totally busted me. I'm like, I'm just curious. They're like, no, we're closed. I'm like, all right, hang up the phone. Photographer comes, we take some pictures outside the church, and the photographer's like, I wonder if they're really closed. So we try to open the front door. It's totally open. He's like, I wonder if the balcony's open. We open the door to the balcony, it's open. So we sneak up to the balcony, take a few pictures, get out of there, and the next day in the Chicago Sun-Times, this is the headline there. He sold his soul for just $504. That's me on the balcony. But look at this headline now. Notice how this changed really quickly. Because I didn't sell my soul. The $504, by the way, was donated to the Secular Student Alliance. But I didn't sell my soul. But this is the headline that started getting picked up places. So here's a newspaper from India. It's hard to see it. It's on the left side there. Indian sells his soul on eBay. $504. In Seattle, Washington, where Jim is from, the top headline there, sold on eBay, chance to save an atheist soul. And all these places, here's what's really creepy. All these newspaper articles, and some of them did their own reporting, they totally got the details of my life wrong. Like, my age is wrong sometimes, the school I go to is wrong, and it's like, really? Like, that's a legitimate paper. Why are they getting details wrong? So take it all with a grain of salt, I guess. The one newspaper that I really liked what they had to say, well, magazine, The Village Voice said some really nice stuff. The stunt has racked up several ad campaigns worth of exposure for what he was actually marketing, atheism as a wholesome American way of life. Didn't think I was doing that, but all right, cool, I'll take it. All right, sweet. All those new, Good Morning America, Anderson Cooper, 360, like I said, they were interested in doing a story, then they had to cancel because they all had real news to report. But guess what station said, no, we're going through with this. We want you on. Fox News. So Fox News is like, no, we want to do something. So they say, we're going to send a limo to your apartment to take you to Fox Studios in Chicago. I'm like, your studios are like 2 blocks from where I live. They're like, we'll send a limo. Like, unnecessary, but all right. I'm not, all right. They drive me 2 blocks. And I go into this building, and I guess they're like 1 floor of a high rise. And I go up there. There's 2 people there. There's a guy running the camera and a makeup lady, and that's it. No one else is in the studio. They say, just chill out in the green room. We'll call you about 10 minutes till you're on the air. We'll put some makeup on you. We'll put you in the chair. Done. I'm like, all right, fine. So I sit down, and about 10 minutes till airtime. And this is not like a famous show or anything. It's just their nighttime news show. They say, all right, let's do some makeup. This lady hadn't seen me yet. And honestly, I don't think she's used to a lot of Indian people in that studio. Coats me with as much makeup because she doesn't know what to do. So I have all this makeup on me. Sit in a chair, and the camera guy's like, you're just going to stare into this camera. You're not going to see any monitors because there's like a couple second delay between satellite and air. So they're like, we're just going to turn off the TV so you're not confused. Here's a microphone and an earpiece. Just speak into this empty void of a camera, which I guess is a metaphor for Fox News in general. And we do this, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but here's what it sounded like.
Selling one's soul to be saved. That is what DePaul University grad student Hemant Mehta did this week.
It's all right if you can't hear.
Was sold on eBay to the highest bidder. So just how much does a soul go for these days? Hemant joins us live from Chicago to tell us.
Can you see my teeth glowing in the toxicity?
Hemant, let me start with you. So
it's all right that you can't hear it. If you actually want to hear it, you can go to YouTube and click on eBay Atheist or search for that. But I'm talking about this thing. This is not what I did. But they're talking to Jim about this auction. It's actually a very pleasant interview. Megan Kelly's the host. Very nice interview. They were very respectful. They let me say what I wanted to say. That's all well and good. I should tell you about what Jim does, because I haven't done that really. Like I said, Jim does that ministry off the map. Jim is used to a lot of those Christians. He hears stories about them. He used to be one of them that tries to convert you on the streets, who, annoys you, they want to save you. And none of that actually works for any of us. We see them and we just get annoyed, right? So he hates them. His slogan for Off the Map is, off the map, helping Christians be normal. Because he gets really annoyed by those Christians. And he wants them to say, like, look, if you want to convert someone, it's not going to just happen like that. You got to know where they're coming from. You got to know if they left the faith. Why did they leave the faith? You got to address it on an intellectual level. And what Jim does is he stands outside a lot of these mega churches, and he said, a lot of those big churches, they have services specially designed for people who are not Christian. They're called seeker services. So he goes outside those churches, and he'll see people walking past, and he'll say, hey, Dan, are you going to church right now? No? Tell you what, I will give you $25 if you go into that service and fill out this survey for me. You give me the survey back, I'll give you $25, I won't contact you ever again. That's it. So these people go, they got nothing else to do. And the survey asks questions like, did you like what the pastor said? Did you like the music? Did anything you hear today touch you emotionally? Did you, would you come back to this church? Did you like the music, the chairs, whatever? They give this thing back to Jim, he gives them the money. Then he takes all these surveys, goes up to the pastor and says, you want to reach out to people who don't go to church? Well, here's what they're saying about you, so what are you going to do about it? Which is kind of pretty cool. Jim actually appeared, how many of you listen to This American Life on NPR? Or PRI? Yeah, it's a popular show. There was an episode maybe a year or two ago called Bait and Switch, where they talked about people who say they want to do one thing, but they really intend on doing another. And Ira Glass, the host, spoke to Jim about Christians and how they say they want to be your friend, like especially when you're young. Like, come to this camp with me or come to church with me. And really, they just want to convert you. They're not really interested in being your friend. And he talked to Jim because Jim hates that, and this is his way of trying to get around that. In fact, what Jim does right now, how many of you have heard of that book, The Shack? Really popular Christian novel? Jim's good friends with the author, and they're actually putting on a stage show featuring the author of The Shack, Danny Goki from American Idol. He's singing at it, and he's doing that in Seattle. So that's what Jim's doing now. But anyway, this is so when Jim heard about this auction, very excited. The chance to send an atheist to church and have them write about it, he's on top of that completely. So he said $500 was our marketing budget for Off the Map. Someone told me we should probably go a little higher, so we did. That was his first time on eBay, first auction he'd ever bid on, and he won. So that's Jim. I should say the story actually got a little more press. That's the magazine Kirk Cameron was on. They did a little story on this auction. They make it sound like I converted by the end of this whole process, which is not true at all. And what actually happened, when I went to all these churches, I'm listening to what they have to say, and I don't think my reaction was any different from what any of your reactions would be. When I'm listening to what they say, I'm like, and I love really good speakers, I love listening to them, and some of these pastors, especially at the big churches, they're there because they're really good speakers. They know how to tell you a message. At the same time, I'm more analytical about it, like, you're telling me the story about Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, the biblical story of it. But how do you know this is true? And, doesn't this seem a little fantastical? And I want to ask those questions still. So I'm not really buying into a lot of the messages they're saying. Even at the services designed to reach out to people who don't go to church, they weren't doing it. So, by the end of this thing, I just learned a lot of these churches have different ways of trying to reach out to people, but they're not really doing a good job of connecting with people who aren't already Christian. And what was interesting is, like I said, when I was writing on Jim's website, there were good comment threads going on. People loved discussing this stuff, and Christians were not unpleasant. Like on that, when they were commenting on the website, they were not attacking me if I didn't like something that happened at a church. They were responding in a nice, pleasant way. So a Christian publisher said, it's kind of weird that an atheist can go to church and criticize it at times, and Christians aren't mad. They were like, when you're done with Jim, we would like to send you to a bunch of other churches across the country and have you write a book about it. And we think Christians would be really interested in reading a book like that. And so that's what I ended up doing. This book is called I Sold My Soul on eBay. And I'm like, that was their idea for the title. I'm like, I didn't actually sell my soul on eBay. They're like, it's all right, it's catchy. And if you flip the book over, they'll see what you really did. I'm like, All right, I'll let that slide. As far as I know, I think this is the only time a book by an atheist, as an atheist, has been published by a legitimate Christian publisher. And this is Waterbrook Press. They're owned by Random House. They put out a few other books and stuff. But this was the book. It came out in like 2007. And it actually, it did decently well. It didn't sell as much as some other books, but I just love the picture. I should say, the one really cool thing that happened, I actually got a lot of emails from Christians who read the book, because their pastors wanted them to read the book to say, like, as a staff, how do we change our church for the better? And they would read this book saying, well, if this is what an outsider sees our church as, and mostly I went to evangelical, non-denominational churches, they wanted to know what they could do to, like, try to reach out to atheists. This is a magazine for Christian pastors, kind of like a journal for them. They actually had a vote on resources for churches to use during the course of the year. And I actually won one of their awards. But let me tell you the secret behind this. The award was for best book about outreach. How to evangelize to other people. Or not evangelize to other people. How do you reach out to other people who don't go to church? It was an online poll that they did. And if you've ever read P.Z. Meyer's books, you know how easy those are to manipulate. So I didn't know P.Z. at the time, but I'm just like, hey, everyone, I have this website. I'm like, hey, everyone, go vote for me. And they did, and I won. And I found one of the other, everyone else was like a pastor who was writing a book about this, and I found one of their websites. He's like, I just lost this award. An atheist won it. What the hell's going on? Awesome. But yeah, so, hey, that works. But, okay, so that happened in 2007. It's been a few years since then. And here's the thing. I totally don't want to be known as the guy who sold his soul on eBay, quote unquote. And that happened. Like, at the time, I was student teaching, because I'm a high school teacher now. I was student teaching, and, this was happening around that time. And I would be going around trying to check kids' homework. I'm like, hey, kid, why didn't you do your homework last night? Oh, I was too busy selling my soul last night. Like, I don't want to do that. So but writing for Jim's website was the first time I've actually written things, for a website. I've written English papers and essays. That's like it. So that was the first time I was writing and then getting immediate feedback. And not only that, like, if they liked it, they really liked it. It made you feel really good. If they hate it, they tear you apart instantly. And it's kind of an addictive thing when you start doing that for a while. So after I finished writing for Jim's website, I started this website called friendlyatheist.com, and that's what I've been doing since then. And so if you're that's kind of what I'm doing now. And one of the things I really want to do with friendlyatheist.com, what I've tried to do, is I want to get rid of that stereotype that so many people have, which is that atheists are these evil, horrible, horrible people. And let me tell you one story about that. One of the things I got to do after this book came out, I got an email from this guy who said, hey, I go to a Christian college, and every year we try to have someone speak to our school who totally disagrees with our student body on some issue. So one year we brought in a feminist. And one year we brought in a local Democrat. He's like, we figured it'd be cool to have an atheist come speak to us about this stuff. So I went to his school. And I kind of gave this similar talk to this, and they just stone-faced the whole time. But it was a cool experience. And afterwards, in that email, he said, P.S., I'm an atheist too. I'm the president of the Honors College, but I'm an atheist. I go here because my dad works here, and I get free tuition. So I figure, all right, I'll just play the game for a couple years, get my undergrad, and then go do whatever I want in grad school. And he's doing whatever he wants now. He's graduated. But I went there, and he introduced me to a couple of his friends who are Christian, but they're the only couple people who know he's an atheist, because if the school found out, he'd be expelled. So his friends were like, hey, we figured you might want this. They gave me a couple sheets of paper. This girl tells me she teaches Sunday school at a local church. And she doesn't control what to teach. Like, the school has a curriculum for her to follow. But she teaches 8-year-olds around that age. And she said one day they said, we want you to teach kids, give them these gingerbread man cutouts, and we want you to have them draw what a Christian looks like. And she's like, well, that's kind of silly, because you don't know what a Christian looks like. You got to talk to them. And they're like, and then give them this other gingerbread man and have them draw what a non-Christian looks like. She's like, this is a bad idea. But she tries to explain to the kids, like, you can't know by looking at someone. You gotta talk to them and find out what they think. They're 8. You know, what are you going to do? So she saved me a couple of their pictures. So according to one kid, this is what a Christian looks like. He has a banana in his hand. He loves God, nicely combed hair, freckles, a cross in his hand. Look at his shirt, like tucked into his pants. Okay, that's what a Christian looks like. Here's what a non-Christian looks like. Same kid. Drugs, piercing, hair all matted around. He tore the sleeves off because he's pissed off. Tattoos coming out of his skin, apparently. Smoking. I think I'm offended most by the unibrow. Here's the thing. This kid is 8. I really don't think his parents are sitting him down and saying, this is what a non-Christian looks like. If you see someone like that, like, I don't think anyone's doing that to this kid, but he's picking it up from somewhere. And if this is the stereotype we got to combat, like, no wonder it's hard for people to come out as atheists. No wonder it's hard to challenge those stereotypes that say we're not trustworthy, we're not moral. And, you know, that's what I want to do with this website. The reason I called it Friendly Atheist, because I don't think it's really all that friendly all the time, but you never hear that phrase. You always hear about atheists, angry atheists, militant atheists. How often do you hear happy, smiling atheists? Like, you don't. So that was a chance to make people put those words together and maybe, you know, get rid of that stereotype that says we're just these immoral baby eaters. You know, just crazy stuff. So, okay, so all that happened a little while ago. I have actually been teaching in a high school for the past 4 years. This is my 4th year teaching math. And only one thing, this is the other story I want to tell you, only one really negative thing has happened as a result of the blogging. Because, again, I keep my blogging very separate from my teaching. Really doesn't cross any paths. But one time, and here's what happened. I'm on the listservs for the local conservative Christian groups because I want to see what they're doing in my area. And I got this email that said they were going to have a talk called A Christ-Like Response to Homosexual Activism in Our Schools. I'm like, all right, I teach at a public school. That's what they're talking about. But what homosexual activism is going on? Like, there's nothing going on. I want to know what they're talking about firsthand because I always read about those people. I always hear about what they say at these meetings. I want to witness it firsthand. So I signed up, I showed up, and I wasn't like I went to church, like I wasn't going there to protest. I'm not holding up giant signs, but I want to know what they're going to talk about at these places. So like I did at the churches, I kind of sat in the back of the room. You hear what they're talking about, and I felt like I was completely out of place there. That's kind of what I felt like. I felt totally out of place. But let me tell you a couple of the things they said regarding what is this homosexual activism that's going on. The lady there, her name is Lori Higgins, she brought up this book called Angels in America, which is a Pulitzer Prize winning book. It's in 2 parts. It's been made into an HBO movie. I haven't read it personally, but she was signaling this particular book because at some suburban school outside of Chicago, there was a teacher who was apparently indoctrinating children with this book. And then she hands us all a piece of paper that says, look at what's inside of this book. All these words. There are 50 uses of the F word and 8 Jesus Christs. And look at these sexual content excerpts and all that stuff. And yeah, okay, there's some graphic stuff in there. Fine, I'll give you that. But that's what she said. She said, this is what they're indoctrinating your kids with, and you're letting them go to public school like this? And they're getting indoctrinated. But here's the thing. Here's what I did my own research later on. Here's what I found out. Here's what she didn't tell you. Part of an advanced placement class for seniors. That means it's a college preparatory class. This is the type of stuff you're going to read in college. We want to get you prepared for college-level readings and discussions. The parents were given a letter from the teacher, and this is part of what the teacher wrote. You can read that for yourself. It's just so beautifully written. But I love this. If any work of literature can be demanding, complex, and nuanced, then that's an exciting prospect. Angels in America is all those things. That's why I teach it. This is not a guy who wants to indoctrinate them in anything. He thinks it's good literature, it's relevant cultural literature, so he wants to expose his students to it. And he understands that parents may not be comfortable with this. Even though the kids are 18 and it's an AP class, maybe the parents aren't comfortable with it. So they had to sign a permission slip if it's okay for their kids to read this book. He told them what it was about. They had to sign a permission slip. And if they were not comfortable with that, there was another option for them. They could request an alternate book with similar themes so they could still take part in discussions. No change of their grades, no punishment or anything like that. They didn't tell me any of this stuff. when I went to this meeting from the Illinois Family Institute. So that's one example of it. This was another thing they talked about. Have you guys heard of the Day of Silence? GLBT activism, like that sort of thing. But they say on a certain day, it actually happened like a week and a half ago or so, they say if you're a gay or lesbian, GLBT student, or you're an ally of that community, wear like a sticker that basically says, I am not speaking today on behalf of all those gay and lesbian students who have had to keep silent about who they are. And, students they can do it, it's optional. It's student run entirely. And here's the thing, if you have to give a class project and you have to speak, you do it. But if you're walking down the hallway and you want to participate, don't talk. Maybe it'll draw attention to the issue. Illinois Family Institute at this meeting, they said, this is going to happen soon. And all you parents, you need to call your school's administrators and find out if they support this. Which is a silly question, because it's not an administration-run thing. They said, you need to pull your kids out of school on this day, because then the school loses money, and that'll show them. Which, again, okay, whatever. They're right. They can do whatever they want to. But here's my question. There's also a thing called the Pro-Life Day of Silent Solidarity, which is basically a copycat of that, but they don't speak on behalf of all the aborted babies. So it's a Christian type of event there. They're the exact same thing, but on different ends of the spectrum. So my question is this. They were very vocal about pulling kids out of school that day, and they said, this has nothing to do with, we're not anti-gay, we love gay people. That's what they always say. We're against the politicizing of the classroom. Well, isn't this also the politicizing of the classroom by that definition? And if you're all over this, and I get tons of press releases from the Illinois Family Institute about the Day of Silence, how come I never hear you guys even mention this? That's my I had my hand raised in the back of the room for like half an hour. Never called on me. Maybe because I'm like the only brown person under the age of 30 in the room. I don't know if that stands out. Whatever. But didn't call on me. So I went up to their president of the organization later, and I'm like, so what's up with this? And he said, it's a really good point. I'm against this too. I don't want that happening in our classrooms either. I'm like, all right, well, how come you guys never put out a press release about this? He's like, you're right. We should put a press release out about that. It's been a year and a half. Never. You could search this thing on their website. There's no mention of it. Okay, so cut to, this happened last year. A Mormon couple in Utah, I guess they kissed. A gay couple kissed, and it was near a Mormon temple. They got arrested for it. And the thing is, people heard about this. Gay activists heard about this. Other allies heard about it. They said, you know what, that's silly. They should not get arrested for doing something that's perfectly legal for straight couples to do. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have something called the Great Nationwide Kissing. If you live in Los Angeles, I don't know, go to the Chinese Theater. If you live in Chicago, go to Millennium Park or Boston Park or whatever. Go to these locations in these cities at 2 o'clock on this Saturday and bring your husband or wife or your girlfriend, boyfriend, bring your partner or whatever. Kiss them and then just walk away. It'll be like a defiant protest supporting all those gay couples, right? Nationwide kissing. So I get an email from the Illinois Family Institute, and they say, you got to keep your kids away from Millennium Park. And this is what they said, an adult kissing a child, that wouldn't be right. What about people who are related by blood and siblings and incestuous couples? You wouldn't want to see them kissing. What about kissing multi-partner unions? You wouldn't want to do that. That's exactly what gay kissing is like. That's why we're opposed to this. Are you kidding me? Like, they're relating a gay couple in love kissing to NAMBLA? Like, you've got to be kidding me. So what do? What can I do? Well, I go on my website and I write a response to it. Illinois Family Institute, keep your kids away from the kissing gays. And let me just share an excerpt of what I wrote here. This is what I wrote on that website. This is what she wrote. We're not suggesting homosexual kissing be banned, but we just want people to not like it. That's essentially what she's saying. Many adults do not care to witness obscene and inappropriate kissing, and their children shouldn't have to. Okay, so here's my response, take it as you will. Wish I had a gay boyfriend. Oh well. Only thing that made the kissing better is if it took place outside her house. Shouldn't have said that. That was wrong of me. Because that's not what I meant. I'm just saying, look, it's not that big of a deal. But let him kiss. It's not a big deal. Whatever. If she wants to keep blindfolds around her kids' heads wherever she goes out in public, she's welcome to. For the rest of us who don't find this obscene or inappropriate, whatever. So, she ran with this. So what she did is she sent an email to my department chair and my principal and every administrator at my school and the entire school board. And she sent this to everyone except me. And she basically says, it's unfortunate that Neuqua Valley High School students have this teacher as a role model. Because look at what he wrote on his website, on his atheist website, basically outing me as an atheist to everyone who's above me in the food chain. What more could parents hope for than a little old-fashioned vindictiveness? Because that's really what that was all about. So, I didn't get this email. I didn't even know this happened. But one of the school board members replies all, CCs me on it, and this is what she said, and this is later that night. Have you considered the possibility that your actions, if I got fired, you'd be subject to liability? Lastly, I wonder why you chose not to include him on the distribution list for your thoughts. Could it be you value the cheap shot most of all? All right. So I'm like, oh crap, what have I done? I'm not responding to any of this. But she writes back to everyone. Okay, she just writes back to everybody the next morning. You know, I wanted to write a press release, but I decided that would be embarrassing. Sorry, let me go back there. She wanted to write a press release, but she didn't want to do that. Even though his blog entry contained inaccuracies, and I offered to have coffee with him to discuss it, he has said no, which, again, first, I don't know what this has to do with anything job-related. Secondly, you know, who cares? I called up my boss, my department chair. I'm like, let me explain to you what's going on here. I have a history, like, with this organization. And she's like, well, you don't teach this stuff in class. I mean, I've seen you teach. Like, you don't talk about this in class. I'm like, no, I don't. And I talked to my principal. He's like, you don't teach about this in class? We really, doesn't look like we have a problem here. But I was really disturbed by this, like, offered to have coffee, because I remember that exchange. I emailed with her earlier when I had issues with something they did. This is an email I sent to her, like, thanks for your email. She had taken me to task because she didn't like some of the things I wrote. So this is what I wrote to her. I'd love to take you up on your coffee suggestion. Can we meet up? I'd love to have a dialogue and talk about the things I didn't like about what you said. She never responded back. So, whatever. I have proof that email exists. But, in any case, okay, so this all happened. After this happened, after she wasn't getting a response from the school board, she decided to go ahead and send out a press release anyway. So this is what went up on in our district, and basically said the exact same thing, outing me as an atheist and my website, and saying, like, apparently that what I do in class is, I don't know, encourage kids to be gay or something like that. But here's, I mean, she makes it sound, in that press release, she makes it sound like what I'm teaching in the classroom. I mean, it's one example. My goal is to spread the gospel of atheism to students across the country. And apparently I want to spread this horrible message that homosexuality is morally equivalent to heterosexuality. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I totally do want to do that. Not in class! Not in class. So apparently she doesn't know that I went to church and I was invited to speak by pastors of the church. I'm not spreading the gospel of atheism when I go to churches, you know? Whatever. So she makes it sound like what I'm doing in the classroom is teaching that 1 + 1 = 2, and a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and some numbers are imaginary just like God. Like, it turned out she wasn't getting a lot of reaction. The administration, the school board, they weren't responding to any of her emails or anything. So she sent out a second press release like 2 days later. She actually went on, yeah. This is what she said in one of her press releases. They wouldn't want their kids to spend a school year under a teacher, a charismatic teacher, who blogs favorably about racism. So why would they be okay if he blogs about atheism and homosexuality? What? Like, are you kidding me? So she sent out a second press release, like, again, about me. This is a more, like, look at, I look badass in that picture, I don't know. My favorite thing, though, she says, she did all this stuff. She says that I cite this website, and I look at all the stuff I'm writing. At one point, she says, sorry about that. She said this in that press release. Look at the obscene things I write about homosexuality. I quoted Dan Savage, the sex columnist, who was like the greatest man alive. And this is what Dan got in, Dan writes an advice column. A kid wrote to him and said, I'm Christian, but I'm gay. What do I do? And this is a part of what Dan said, like, whatever. You get one chance at happiness. You are who you are. Like, it's an awesome, funny, anti-religious, funny message. I posted that on my website just saying, I love the response. It's funny, it's interesting. And I said as much there. I love Dan Savage. He's hilarious and sex positive. But I'm not doing this in the classroom. There's a big difference. And I guess Dan Savage, who has a Google alert, must have a Google alert on his name, heard about this. So he wrote to me and he's like, he was very upset about this. I love Dan Savage. I've met Dan Savage. It's like the highlight of my life. This is what Dan writes to me as all this is happening. I'm about to go off on these douchebags. Or not. Like, Dan, you can do whatever you want. Anyway, I don't know what he did, but she was not happy, so she sent out a third press release. This goes on for a while. Do you see the pattern here? So what ends up happening? My principal says, we should have a meeting about this. I'm like, is he going to cave in to what she's saying? And he says, look, here's the deal. We know you don't talk about this in the classroom. No parent has ever said you talk about this in the classroom. None of the kids have. We know you don't. So on that level, your job is secure. He told me that right up front. He said, what we should do is come up with a battle plan just in case. We don't know if this newsletter and her press releases, who knows if they go out to 10 people or they go out to 10,000 people. He's like, just in case there's a backlash, we should know what to do in case. Like, what should the school say? So he said, by the way, the assistant superintendent of public human resources is going to join us at this meeting in a second. Basically, I told her, look, I know what the law says. I know what you're supposed to talk about and not talk about. I stick to math in the classroom. I work with atheist groups that go after, religious people who preach in the classroom. I know what not to do. She just looks at the principal. She's like, are we done with this meeting now? I don't need to do this. So school, incredibly supportive. And not supportive of what I do outside of school. They don't care what I do outside of school, which is like exactly what you could hope for. But then, this happened about 1.5 years ago. This year, at the beginning of the school year, I found out Illinois Family Institute was doing one last thing. They were supporting this thing called the Truth Academy. And this was a thing where they were going to train young people to become activists against gay rights. And I'm kind of disturbed by that. And I would love to say, hey, I'm kind of interested. I will sign up for this. $100 fee to register, I will pay for that. I want to sit in on this meeting. I want to know what they're going to say firsthand again. But they know who I am. So I know they're going to find a way to say no. So I asked on my website, hey, does anyone want to go? Because I'll pay for you to go. I got a lot of responses. And so 2 people I ended up sending. They're both like grad students, kind of older, but not quite old enough. They look like they're college students. They both went. 3 days they sat through this. And they gave me the most detailed write-up of everything that was said and who said it and all the material. And I posted this on my website. And the best story from this whole thing, there was a guy and a girl who went. The girl's name is Maria. Maria said, there weren't a lot of students at this thing. It was a lot of older Christians who were just interested in what was going on, not a lot of students. So she said there was one girl who was, when they were talking about homosexual activism, one girl kept asking questions like, well, how do you know if someone's gay? Or, what do you do if a person does this in class? Good questions, I suppose. And so Maria's like, well, she seems like someone I could talk to. So, they had a nice conversation. And at the end of the first day, the other girl comes up to Maria. She's like, hey, you know what? I had a really good time talking to you. I'm not going to be coming back for the next couple days. I should tell you this. I'm actually a reporter for another website. I'm just coming to recover this. Maria's like, oh my God, me and that other guy are also going to work. And the first girl says, oh my God, so is that other person over there? All the students were like undercover reporters. Someone sent me a link to like an article from The Onion that said like 95% of the KKK rally are undercover reporters. But they went to this thing and they were all reporting, and we saw their write-ups later on and stuff. But I love this idea of just like, they're not disruptive. All they're doing is reporting on what is being said there. Here are the actual documents they use. Here are the scans of the documents. And that alone makes them look bad. That's why they never want people hearing what they say, like firsthand, because it works for their base. But if other people hear it, it sounds horrible. So I've been doing a lot more of this. And hopefully this summer we're sending people again to another place. But just, again, you don't have to be disruptive. You don't have to, their words and their beliefs make them look bad by themselves. We don't need to do anything except show people. So been doing a lot of that. After this happened, and actually out of all the people that spoke at this academy, everyone sounded really bigoted and hateful. And Maria and the other guy who went there, they said, you know who didn't sound hateful and bigoted? Lori, the person who spoke at that homosexual activism thing. She was actually the sane one out of this group. And so she actually wrote me after all this happened. She's like, you know, I saw that you wanted to send people there. She didn't know I was sending people there. She just saw I was looking for people. She said, why don't we actually go out and have that coffee? I'm like, you know what? I'm up for that. Let's do it. So we did. We met for coffee. Oh, by the way, I should say, this is what the AFTA people, Americans for Truth About Homosexuality, this is what they sent out on their press release. I want students to spy. Apparently I'm sending 14-year-olds to go spy. This is what I didn't like. Something tells me that numbers and equations aren't all he's talking about in his classroom. Not true. And so when I emailed her, I'm like, what's up with that? Like, why is he writing that? That's just wrong. You know it's wrong, too, because you know that I don't teach about this in the classroom. She said, you're right. I'm going to see if we can change it. Never changed it. But we did have coffee. And here's what basically we talked about. I mean, I don't want to get into all the details of what we talked about, but very pleasant conversation. We talked about, you know, what's right for a teacher to do and what's wrong for a teacher to do. I think she understands that, you know, when I'm in the classroom, I'm there to talk about math. And in my private life, yeah, I am going to criticize stuff she does. And I'm going to criticize the group and what they stand for, and there's nothing wrong with that either. At the same time, you know, she admitted, like, they don't want to do personal attacks. They're not going to do anything else like that relating to my job. She's like, you know, maybe if you write something on the blog we don't like, we might go after that. Fine, I don't care. But don't go after my job. It was actually a pleasant conversation. So it's possible. I don't know. That's kind of a nice thing. So yay, coffee. Okay, so how do I still have a job after all this? I do a nice job, I think, of keeping my private life separate from my public life. The students know that. Even if they know I have a website, they know I don't talk about it in the classroom. Very supportive administration. Like, if this happened in Alabama, I don't know what I would have done. So I'm thankful for that. And I got so many emails from teachers who saw those press releases who said, hey, I'm also an atheist and I teach in this high school and it's crazy what they're doing to you. Christians who are living in the community said the same thing. So that was all well and good. Just a couple last things and I'm all done. Now that I'm actually done, I've been a board member of the Secular Student Alliance for 6 years and I'm done with my term limit now, so I'm stepping away from them. I've actually been working with this fantastic organization called Foundation Beyond Belief. And the organization is essentially a group that says, look, we always hear about when the earthquake in Japan hit and the tsunami there, you always hear about Christian groups sending money, sending people there to help out. You never hear like, oh, those atheists sent people to help or they sent money. You never hear that, even though it happens. So Dale McGowan, who wrote this great book called Parenting Beyond Belief, he started this group and he said, atheists do all these good things all the time anyway. Why don't we try to say we're doing it as atheists? So what Foundation Beyond Belief does, we have about 10 categories, and every 3 months we pick a new charity, a secular charity, that does work in the categories of human rights and women's rights and poverty and hunger and peace. And we pick a different charity to give money to each quarter out of those 10. And if you donate, I donate $20 a month. And what he basically says is, look, here's the 10 categories. You can divvy up your donation however you want. Like, I want 10% to go to the Peace Charity. I want 10% to go to the women's rights. I really like the Children's Education Foundation charity. So I want to give 30% of my donation there. And you can do that here. It's been going since January 1st of last year. And if you could see this, we've raised over $130,000 now. This is taken a little bit ago. We've raised over $130,000. When the Japan earthquake happened, we raised over $20,000 in about a week for that. So if you're interested, it's a great group. All the money goes directly to the charities, and you can donate to the foundation on your own if you want to do that. But foundationbeyondbelief.org is that. And finally, just to show you how cool the SSA has been lately, this is the growth of our campus atheist groups across the country. This isn't even the fall of 2011, but we're over 250 groups nationwide. When I joined, and I'm not taking credit for this, I'm just saying, when I joined, we were at about 50 groups. So in the past few years, maybe because of the atheist books, maybe because people are finally more out about their atheism, the number of campus groups has grown tremendously. And starting this fall, we're starting to do special outreach to help high school atheists start groups at their schools. So that's Secular Student Alliance, if you're interested in them. And if you have any questions for me, there's my contact information. I'll leave that up there, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions now. Thank you so much. Any questions? Yeah.
So you give her credit for going to coffee with you and having a pleasant conversation, but wasn't she being really two-faced about the pleasantries and the niceties that she was giving you at that point, versus not taking anything down that she said she would? Why not call her out on that instead?
Right. I do think she's being sincere when we went out for coffee and stuff. That's not her website. That's not the one she runs. She kind of works loosely with the guy who runs it. She's like, I will try to tell him to take it down, but ultimately it's that guy's website. And I have no doubt she actually did tell him, you know, you should take that down and here's why. It's not her fault if it's not down. So I don't, it's either that. She knows I have a problem with it, and I have sent her an email as much saying that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying she's like, oh, look, everything's great and peachy now. Believe me, I've still criticized her since then on my website. I'm not giving her more credit than I think she deserves, but I think it's good on both sides to say, like, you know what, instead of just having a flame war via blogs and emails,
Right.
let's just meet in private where it's not like a public conversation for the world and see if there's anything we could hash out and figure that out.
Has she apologized for trying to go after your job?
Yes.
Okay.
So.
On her blog?
No, and part of that, I don't think I'd want her to. I don't want her to bring more attention to it. It's done, it's over with, and I'd rather just leave it at that. So I'm fine with that. Yeah.
I think very often religious people suffer from what's known as cognitive dissonance, where they have conflicting sets of ideas depending on who they're talking to. For example, I have a neighbor who's constantly telling me how Jesus' return is imminent and the end of the world is imminent, and I find out that his money is invested in T-bills with 25-year maturity and so forth.
Right.
You know, do you run into this? What happens when you point it out to them?
You know, what's weird is I don't run into those people as much. I will hear it when I went to those churches, and I went to maybe 30, but between for Jim, the pastor, and for writing the book, I probably went to 30, 40 churches, somewhere in there. And yeah, you will hear people talk about that stuff, and it's like, I can write about it, and I can talk about it, but most of the Christians will find some logical way of making it make sense, like you're saying. They'll find a way to rationalize their dissonance. But for the most part, the people I run into on the website, the people I run into in my private life, they're not that crazy. So it's all right. Like, I don't get a lot of hate mail, and I don't get a lot of email from like fundamentalist Christians trying to convert me. Maybe because I don't give off that vibe or something on the website, but I don't run into that much. Yeah, sir.
What are your future interests or projects? What's the next mountain to conquer?
I think the thing I'm really excited about, and this is still with the Secular Student Alliance, just getting more people to come out of the closet as atheists. I mean, I know you guys talk about that here too. Just getting more people to say they're atheists. And I think, I became an atheist when I was a freshman in high school. I don't think that's that atypical from what a lot of people go through. So I want to work with the SSA. We're going to see what we can do to push high school groups to get started. I don't know if this had anything to do with me. The kids tend to know I write a website. I don't talk about it in class, but they know, because they'll Google it, they'll find that stuff out. But I did have a student come up to me saying she wanted to start an SSA group at her high school. All right, fine, I'll be your sponsor for that if you want to get it started. You take care of it though. Like, I'm not doing that for you. But I think that's the next mountain to conquer is getting younger people saying they're okay with coming out of the closet and getting them to say, you know what, I don't want to hide my atheism. Maybe I can understand they have to hide it from their parents at that age, but not among their friends. And so I'm kind of curious to see where that's going to go. And I think there's the perpetual problem of getting more women involved in all these things, getting more minorities involved in all these things. There's no one way I found to make that happen other than getting people in those minorities to come out and say they're okay with it. But I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with the high school groups. Yeah.
Since you saw a variety of services, do you have any, can you give us your opinion about this trend in America where a lot of people are leaving like the more traditional churches like Episcopalian or Roman Catholic and becoming evangelical?
Yeah.
What did you see from your point of view?
I can see why they would do that. Like, when you go to those bigger evangelical churches, there's a better community, like a stronger community there. It's not just rituals, it's a message that they're taking back. Like, they're not going there to memorize liturgy or just recite something. They're going there because they hear like an inspiring message. They go there because they have daycare provided, which I don't know how many of the other churches can have that. Like, they have the availability for that. They're going there because they have, you can go to those churches, and if you haven't been to a mega church, and I know there are some around here, go, just for the experience. Like, you can go there, you could revolve your whole life around that thing. They have bookstores, cafeterias, they have tutoring if you need it. They have everything you could possibly need at every stage in your life. You know, if you're going through a divorce, there's a ministry for that. If you need help with your taxes, there's someone who runs the financial ministry.
Car clubs.
Car clubs, there's motorcycle clubs, skateboard clubs. Like, you can take care of everything. Like, no wonder they're going there, because they get it. And I don't think a lot of them really care what the rest of the message is. But, like, if you're part of that church, you're part of this automatic group of friends. So I can see why they would go there. If you ask me to go back to one of the churches, I don't want to go back to one of those, because you hear a band play every week, you get to hear good music, you hear, if you take out the God aspect of it, you hear a really good message. Like, I can see why they're doing that, so it doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, I think a lot of the younger generation of Christians, they're almost as disturbed as we are regarding how politicized it's become, and how, like, the younger Christians growing up, they don't have as much of a problem with gay people as their parents do. So you're going to see that shift take place. Like, the popular Christian writers among younger Christians, they are not the people who talk about, like, let's stop homosexuality, let's stop, pornography is all evil, and feminism is all evil. Like, they're not like that. They're talking about inspiring messages about living a better life. Those are the popular authors among younger Christians. So I think that trend is happening. It's better in some ways, but it's still getting bigger. Yeah?
How do you find it best to combat the perception of the angry, militant atheist without becoming more combative?
I think one of the ways, you're not going to change a lot of people's minds, like, no matter what you say or do, but I think it's good to see, like, a lot of community service projects. Every time, a lot of conferences I've been to lately, they always seem to have a service project attached with it. Like the Day of Prayer, National Day of Prayer is coming up on like May 5th or May 7th or something. Combat that with a blood drive run by atheists, because we're actually doing something to help. And anytime you can like do something like that, I know when in college, a group I worked with, like we didn't have a lot of money because it's a college group, and like what dues can you really ask for like, other than $2? But we take like our stack of $20 or $30, go to a grocery store, and we could get like bread and peanut butter and apples and maybe generic cola, whatever, granola bar. Take some sack lunches, make lunches, and then go around the streets of Chicago just kind of handing it out. And maybe there's a message in the bag that says, you know, this is brought to you by the atheists at this campus. Again, it's just one of those things, like, I've seen a lot more positive articles about what atheists are doing on campuses. And again, what a lot of them are doing, we actually, the SSA Secular Student Alliance did this last month. We had an Ask the Atheist Day. Because the group wanted to do like an Ask an Atheist, they'll just set up a table on the quad with a sign that says, ask us whatever you want, we're atheists.
She saw that and came home with stickers.
Awesome. Yeah, and we said, well, that's a great idea. They said, can we make this like a national thing? And we had a lot of groups doing that on one day, all at once, and there were articles all over the place in campus papers, local papers about, hey, these are nice people, and they're just answering your questions. Doesn't matter how crazy it might be. They're answering your questions. And again, none of that's going to say, oh, well, I've changed my mind. Atheists must be great people. But it does defeat that stereotype of like the evil, unibrowed, crazy dude. When you see like, oh, well, here's an atheist who seems perfectly nice, and they're answering my questions, and I could have a conversation with this person. And I think Bobby mentioned like you didn't know any gay people 30 years ago around you. But when you know someone who's gay, it's a lot harder to demonize them. And the same thing goes for atheism. Like when you know someone, like when there was like an atheist week on Facebook, someone just randomly started it, but it just said change your profile picture to like the Richard Dawkins Out campaign A, or just put a sign that says I'm an atheist with a smiling face next to it. And if your friends know that you're an atheist, it's less hard to say like, oh, they're immoral or, you know. So that's come out of the closet, try to do good things, because we would do that anyway, but let it be known. Is there a question there? Yeah.
Yeah, in regard to being an atheist and spreading the word, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens seem to have more of a combative type of argument that they want to put forward. And it seems like you want to put more of a dialogue with the people and then with the theists and deists and then kind of domesticating it. Yeah. Do you think that those two complement each other, or do you think that the combative atheists are kind of at war with the atheists that want to engage? Which path do you think would be more effective
I don't know if there's a more effective, like Richard Dawkins, I heard one person put it this way, Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens is like, they're like a bitter pill that they're trying to force you to swallow, and then you need the nicer, gentler atheist to help you, give you the water to help swallow it down. I don't think there's a battle there. Well, I can tell you this, like, I'm sure Dawkins and Hitchens get their share of the crazies when they get responses from Christians, and like I said, I don't see a lot of that. I've had churches say, like, we'd like to do a dialogue on stage because we want Christians to hear where you're coming from because they ought to be exposed to that. And a lot of Christians like to insulate themselves. So I've done a few of those dialogues where it's just like me and a pastor on stage where they'll say, like, they'll have a moderator or the audience can write down their questions and ask questions that way. And they'll have a moderator just ask general questions like, well, what do you as an atheist think about Christians? What do you think about church in and of itself? And it's not a combative thing, but it's like, let me hear your perspective. I don't think anyone's inviting Dawkins to do something like that. Because they know he's probably not that type of person, but I think I put myself out there as someone who's able to do that. And every time I've done those things, and I've done it like 4 or 5 times at different churches, it's gone really well. And like, even afterwards, like even the churches say like, make sure that when you're talking to him afterwards, don't paint a target on his body. He's not there for you to convert. But if you want to have a conversation, go up and talk to him or something like that. The one place I did go, they took note cards from the audience with their questions. They had an usher filter through the weird questions, take the normal ones, give them to the pastor who read through them. And he's like, that's a good one. I'll ask that question. And as a thank you gift, they gave me the stack of all the cards. One of the questions on there was, are you an atheist because you hate your father? Like, really? Someone thinks that's the reason? Like, but again, it's being exposed to atheists. And I know it's not just me. There are other places do it too. I think a lot of the younger churches too, they reach out to like Muslims and they'll say, come in and tell us about your beliefs. Tell us what we're doing as Christians that you don't like. Besides the fact we believe in different things, but are we doing anything that makes you uncomfortable? They'll bring in an atheist and do the same thing that way. And I think a lot of the Christians that are younger are really interested in those conversations. And we encourage all of our SSA affiliates, do a lot of interfaith events. Have discussions, don't just have discussions about does hell exist amongst your atheist group, because that's a boring conversation among the group of atheists. Invite the Christian group, invite the Hindu group. I saw a debate on creation versus evolution sponsored by the atheist group and like the Hindu Student Council. Had nothing to do with the debate, but like they were like, oh, that sounds like a cool conversation. We want to be a part of that. So they joined in. Like, just do that sort of stuff. Yeah.
One of the weird questions was, are you an atheist because you hate your father? Wouldn't that actually be a good question to tackle to sort of separate the two? Or
have they asked it? Sure. I mean, I think I did explain at the time, here's why I'm an atheist. And it had nothing to do with because I hated anyone. But that particular, the phrasing of the question was just weird. But yeah, I mean, I did explain, like, here's why I'm an atheist. But yeah.
Do you ever have any of your students come up to you, they've read your blog, or they've seen you maybe at one of these events and want to discuss atheism with you when you're teaching?
I don't think they've ever come to an event. They have seen the book. Some of them have, and they'll mention it to me. I usually do shut them down then. I'm like, we're not discussing this now. Or they'll try to tell me a story like I had a kid come up and say like, you know, I had to go to like a baptism this weekend, but I didn't like it. I don't care. Go do your homework. But no, I mean, they know I'm not talking about that, and I don't want to discuss it with them. But like I said, if that girl wants to start an SSA group at school, then maybe there's a place for those discussions. I think they're pretty much aware that I'm not discussing it with them, and they kind of know that, so they don't try as much, which is good. That's how it should be. Yeah.
Can they actually, or do they actually try to use the churches that you went to? Do they actually try to use the information that you provided them to convert atheists? Because is that sort of...
Well, I mean, I think one of the things they get out of those discussions is if you're trying to convert me, like, it's not going to work. Like, there's nothing you're doing or that you're going to say that's like that I haven't heard a bunch of times before, and like that's the wrong way of doing it. If you want to get me to even have this discussion with you, you have to respect that I don't agree with you. And like, I think what they get out of it, if anything, is not, oh, now I know how to convert atheists. It's, okay, there's probably atheists in my life. and maybe I can have a conversation if I read one of their books. Maybe if I want them to read the Bible, I should read, Richard Dawkins' book. I hope that's what they're getting out of it. I have yet to hear anyone say, like, you made me better able to convert an atheist.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
Couldn't you be an ethical Jain without believing in God?
Yeah, I mean, Jains in and of itself don't believe in God, but they do believe in the supernatural stuff. And like, I don't know if I can call myself a Jain if I don't believe in that supernatural stuff, but I'm still a vegetarian, which I've always been, and I thought that made sense, and that has nothing to do with me being Jain. That just kind of makes sense outside of it. So that's why I don't call myself that anymore. If you do have any other questions, contact information is there. I'm around here for a little while. Please get in touch with me. But thank you all for coming.